Alright, for this video, we're going to practice simplifying radicals. So remember, when we're simplifying a radical, we're looking for the largest perfect square. So these numbers up here that go in, that divide into that number. So we're looking for what number divides into 75 evenly. So if we don't remember, we can always, looking at the list, figure out which number divides in evenly by finding that number where 75 would fit on that list. So that would be right here, right? 75 would be right here. So then I'm going to divide 75 by these numbers to figure out which one gives me a whole number and not a decimal answer. So if I do 75 divided by 64, I would get a decimal, so it's not 64. If I do 75 divided by 49, I would get a decimal, so it's not 49. If I do 75 divided by 36, I get a decimal, so it's when I get to 75 divided by 25 that I get a number that's not a decimal. So my largest perfect square is 25. Because it tells me that 75 is 25 times 3. So then I can rewrite this radical with that information. The square root of 25 is the same thing as the square root of 25. Or the square root of 75, I'm sorry. The square root of 75 is the same thing as the square root of 25 times the square root of 3. So now I can simplify one of these. I can only simplify one of them, and I can only simplify the one that's on our list. So I can't simplify the square root of 3, so that's going to stay the same. But I know that the square root of 25 is 5. So here is my simplified answer. So let's try another one. If I have the square root of 24, I'm looking for the largest perfect square that divides into 24. So again, we could figure out where it would be on our list. So 24 would fit right between 16 and 25. Right? It's bigger than 16 but smaller than 25. So now let's just try dividing. So 24 divided by, if I did 24 divided by 16, I'd get a decimal. So it can't be 16. If I did 24 divided by 9, I would get a decimal. If I do 24 divided by 4, I get 6. So this would be my largest perfect square. So 24 is 4 times 6. So I can rewrite this radical. Square root of 24 is the same thing as the square root of 4 times the square root of 6. Now, since the square root of 6 is not on my list, that's going to stay the same, but the square root of 4 is 2. So then this would be my simplified answer. All right, so I want you to go ahead and try using these two examples. I want you to go ahead and try these two here. So I'm going to kind of leave it like this so you can pause the video and looking at these two examples, try to do these bottom two. So hopefully you paused the video and tried number 3 and 4, but let's go over them together just in case we got stuck. So remember, the goal is to find the largest perfect square that goes into 45. So if I found it on my list, that would be here. The largest perfect square that gave me a whole number would be 9, because 45 is 9 times 5. So then I can rewrite the square root of 45 as the square root of 9 times the square root of 5. Since the square root of 5 is not on my list, that's going to stay the square root of 5. And then I know the square root of 9 is 3. So then that would give me my simplified answer. So now doing 32, we're going to do the same thing. So if 32 on my list would be right here. So if I tried 32 divided by 25, that would give me a decimal. If I try 32 divided by 16, that would give me 2. So that tells me that 32 is 16 times 2. So my largest perfect square was 16. So then I can rewrite the square root of 32 as the square root of 16 times the square root of 2. Now remember, the square root of 2 is not on the list, so that's going to just stay the same. And then I can simplify the square root of 16. The square root of 16 is 4, so I can simplify that and write it on the outside. And there would be my answer. All right, let's look at a couple that are pretty similar. They're going to have a number in the front. So if we look at number 1 here, it has that number in the front. It's not going to change how we simplify the radical. It's just going to change what the number on the outside is. So first I want to simplify the square root of 12. So I'm looking for the largest perfect square that goes into. Okay, so Going back to this, sorry if the video got interrupted, but what I want to do is I want to simplify that radical first, just like I was before. So we're looking for that largest perfect square that goes into 12. So if I look here, 12 would fit between 9 and 16. So if I did 12 divided by 9, I would get a decimal, so that's not going to work. If I do 12 divided by 4, I get 3. So that tells me that 12 is 4 times 3. So then we're going to rewrite the square root of 12, and I'm just going to bring down this 2 so I don't forget about it. But the square root of 12 is the square root of 4 times the square root of 3. So now the square root of 3 I can't simplify, so I'm just going to bring that down, right? It's not on my list, so it can't be simplified. The square root of 4, however, is 2. And then I have this other 2 on the outside. These two numbers are going to be multiplied together. So then if I multiply 2 times 2, I would get 4, and then the square root of 3 would just stay the square root of 3. So it would be my simplified answer. All right, so let's try that next one. We're going to do the same thing for this one. So I'm going to solve my square root first. So 50 on my list would be right here. That's where 50 would be. So then if I did 50 divided by 49, I would get a decimal, so it's not 49. If I did 50 divided by 36, that would give me a decimal, so it's not 36. So then if I did 50 divided by 25, I get 2. So then that's my largest perfect square. And I know 50 is 25 times 2. So when I rewrite my radical, I can rewrite the square root of 50 as the square root of 25 times the square root of 2, and then we're just going to bring that negative 5 down in the front. So now, I can't simplify the square root of 2 because it's not on my list, so I just bring it down. The square root of 25 is 5, so I'm going to write that here. And then remember, I'm multiplying it by this other number on the outside. So then negative 5 times 5 would give me negative 25, and then I keep that square root of 2. So all I did was combine these two by multiplying, and I have my answer. So go ahead and try. Again, I'm going to leave these two up so you can kind of see the process while you try numbers 3 and 4. So go ahead and pause the video, and then when we come back, we'll do 3 and 4 together. All right, so let's try 3 and 4. So again, we're going to simplify this radical first. So I find my radical on my list. That would be right here is 63, right between 49 and 64. So if I tried all of these numbers, 49, 36, 25, 16 would not work. The first number that would work would be 9. If I divide 63 by 9, I get 7. So that tells me that 63 is 9 times 7. So when I rewrite this, I'm going to rewrite this as the square root of 9 times the square root of 7. And then I'm just going to bring down this 4. Now, the square root of 7 is not on my list, so that's going to stay the square root of 7. The square root of 9, however, is on my list, so I can simplify that. The square root of 9 is 3, and then again, I just bring down that 4. So then 4 times 3 is 12, and I bring down that square root 7. And my answer would be 12 square root 7. All right, moving on to number 4. So again, the square root of 200 is actually off over here on our list. So if I try my numbers, I should have stopped at 100, because if I divide 200 by 100, I should have gotten 2. So that tells me that 200 is 100 times 2. So when we rewrite the square root of 200, we would rewrite it as the square root of 100 times the square root of 2 and bring that 5 down. So then square root of 2 is not on my list, so I just bring that down. The square root of 100 is on my list, so that means I can find the square root of 100, and that would be 10, and then I bring that 5 down. And then what I'm going to do is combine these by multiplying. So 5 times 10 is 50. Square root 2 is my answer. So now, to get more practice, if you go back to the Schoology page, there's a practice simplifying radicals page 177 through 178. Those are our workbook pages. But we put them on Schoology since your workbook's more than likely at school. We put them on Schoology so that you could practice. So go ahead and get some more practice in. And then if you have any questions, remember tomorrow from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. I'll be on Zoom so I can answer any questions that you have.